This is Garis, Masculist, MGTOW flyers. That is 2 3-page essays on the themes of masculism and MGTOW, written by and read aloud by Prof. Dr. Hugo de Garis. This is flyer number 623, entitled Masculist Revenge Crushing of Feminazi Misandry. This is part 2, carrying straight on. The most effective way we masculists have found to stop monoconscious feminist misandry is to target your boyfriends, your currently monoconscious male feminist boyfriends, by teaching them masculism. 99.5% of you women are heterosexual, so even the most rabid feminazi is still dependent on men for her sex. We masculists target those boyfriends, teaching them the basic ideas of masculism so that they become biconscious. If their monoconscious feminist girlfriends remain monoconscious, then these boyfriends, with their new bi-consciousness, will become contemptuous of their feminist girlfriends' monoconsciousness and then dump them. When millions of monoconscious feminists have been dumped, there will grow an awareness amongst these dumped feminists that it's very much in their self-interest to become biconscious, to learn some masculist ideas, so that they no longer suffer the illusion that gender oppression is a one-way street, which is a monoconscious feminazi doctrine that is so vicious towards men, so ignorant, so arrogant, so misandrous, that masculists have a hatred of monoconscious feminists and punish them so strongly that effectively we exterminate such women by forcing them to rot on the shelf, dying slow, miserable deaths by being totally ignored, not even pumped and dumped." End quote. After such an opener, the monoconscious feminist will probably be profoundly shocked. If she retaliates, then the masculists can launch into details on how women oppress men, with women's manslavery, women's divorce rape, women's forced fathering, etc. All young campus men should be well informed of these big 3 gender crimes that women commit against men, so that these young men are intellectually armed with these masculist arguments and can hold them at MFBs. These campus masculists can then tell these monoconscious feminists that masculists are abolitionists who see manslavery as 1,000 times bigger problem than was Negro slavery in the 1800s in the US. Masculists are at war against their 2 main enemies, the fluffies, that's in brackets, traditional women who expect to live off the money and labour of a man for decades of his life, thus manslaving him for decades, close brackets, and the fluffy feminists. Masculists aim to exterminate fluffies and fluffy feminists. A fluffy feminist is a feminist who still has fluffy expectations of men, especially in the divorce courts, where 1 father in 4 gets butchered in the fluffy feminist controlled divorce court system, causing masculists to truly hate fluffy feminist divorce court lawyers and judges. Masculists tell monoconscious feminists that masculists aim to create a FIP society by FIPPing women, FIP, financially independent person, forcing them to become FIPs by studying career competent majors in high school and college so that they are not fluffies as adults. Masculists tell monoconscious feminists that masculists aim to create GECs, GECs, that's gender equality committees, in the parliaments, that consist half of female feminists and half of male masculists, so that the gender issues of both sexes are dealt with equally. The male half of these GECs will then push for the FIPPing of women, the creation of a FIP society, the legislation of the PARA, that's paternity rejection right, so that men have the same legal right to reject an unwanted pregnancy as women have, so that men are not manslave for 2 decades paying for a kid that he didn't want in the first place, a major gender crime that women commit against men, that masculists label forced fathering. Masculists want women who commit paternity fraud, that is, when a woman lies to her man that the kid growing inside her is his when she knows it isn't. To be put behind bars for 15 years, since paternity fraud is a worse crime than rape, which usually gets a man a 10-year prison sentence. Masculists also want the legislation of the OPTAB, O-P-T-A-B, obligatory paternity testing at birth for all births, to block paternity fraud. The above paragraphs show clearly that women oppress men, the topic of the first pillar mentioned above. They also show what the Masculists are aiming to do about it. We turn now to the second pillar, major pillar, mentioned above, and that is women's genetic inferiority relative to men in so many respects. If young campus men are well informed of such science-based masculist ideas, then they can use these facts to great effect when confronted by the unconscious arrogance of a monoconscious feminist who uses her knowledge of how men oppress women to piss on men. A well-informed masculist can then give this monoconscious feminist a real taste of her own hypocritical medicine. When a monoconscious feminist behaves in a morally superior manner towards men, or claims that women are as capable as men in general, then a masculist can then launch into a speech similar to this one, to counter her gender political ignorance, her misandry, her arrogance, her bigotry. Quote, "You women are dumber than men by 4 IQ points on average. Your female brains are 10% smaller. That's like taking an ice cream scoop out of the male brain. That's 10 billion fewer neurons in the female brain. So no wonder women don't build anything, invent anything, create anything. Women have a 10% smaller IQ variance than men. So their IQ scores over a whole population are more bunched up, and men's are more spread out, so that the morons and the genii are males. So it's not surprising that women have won a pathetic 7% of science Nobel Prizes, in brackets, looking at the latest stats. Women have 20 times lower testosterone levels in their blood, so are far less aggressive than men, much less ambitious, driven, dogged, persistent, so are much more wishy-washy and give up more easily, so accomplish far fewer demanding tasks than men. So it's not surprising that men look down on women in general, not respecting them, since the female accomplishment track record is so inferior to men's. The only real attraction that women have for men are women's vaginas. Men's sex drive is a lot stronger than women's, as shown by the fact that there are many times more female prostitutes than male prostitutes. If you take away the sex, then probably most men would quickly ignore women, treating women as alien inferiors, with women's emotionalism, women's irrationality, women's hysterics, etc. After 6 decades of modern feminism, most women are accustomed to men just quietly slinking away from a feminist tirade against men for the ways that men oppress women. This has been the case for 6 decades since the second wave feminism got going in the 60s. But we now live in the decade of men's liberation, in which men liberate themselves from the man's slavery of fluffies who push for the gex, etc. A man who is intellectually armed with masculinist ideas and rhetoric no longer slinks away at hearing a feminist diatribe against men's oppression of women, but rather attacks her back, telling her that women oppress men worse, and that masculists bite the fucking heads off monoconscious feminists for their gender political bigotry and hypocrisy. When millions of biconscious masculists bite the fucking heads off millions of monoconscious feminists and dump them as girlfriends, we will then live in a very different world. Once there are millions of masculists who bite the fucking heads off monoconscious feminists, monoconscious feminism will die out, being replaced by biconscious feminism, which makes women much nicer towards men, since biconscious feminists have had their anger at men for the ways that men oppress women cancelled by their anger at women for the ways that women oppress men. Hence are a lot more approachable by men, so are more likely to have and to keep a boyfriend, a biconscious boyfriend. Hopefully, the essence of masculist thinking shown above can serve as the intellectual, gender-political repertoire for all young men on campus so that they no longer have to suffer the awful misandry and bigotry of monoconscious feminazi bigots, that's MFBs, whose fucking heads biconscious masculists bite off with verbally vicious, angry, hateful masculist attacks, teaching these monoconscious feminists that gender oppression is definitely not a one-way street, and that in fact women oppress men far worse. Cheers. Prof. Dr. Hugo de Garis. Email profhugodegaris@yahoo.com. Website profhugodegaris.wordpress.com. Author of the book Masculism, Men's Rebellion Against Being Manslaves to Women, an e-textbook of 620 plus masculist flyers for men's studies courses. Freely downloadable in Microsoft Word format from my website. Ciao.